My name is David Ben Moshe Goldstein, and I never thought I'd share this. For 3 years, I've carried this vision like a stone lodged in my throat, like a fire burning in my bones that refuses to be extinguished. 3 years of waking up at 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat, seeing that wall of water rising higher than the Statue of Liberty, watching Manhattan disappear beneath waves that move with the intelligence of divine judgment. 3 years of carrying the memory of his face, the face of Yeshua, the one my people have waited for since the destruction of the temple, showing me what's coming to America. I am a Jew, born in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, in the same brownstone where my Zayd lived and died, raised Orthodox in a family that traces its lineage back to the rabbis of Vilna. I kept kosher for 43 years. I davened 3 times a day in the synagogue where 4 generations of Goldsteins wrapped themselves in Talatot and whispered the ancient prayers. I studied Talmud until my eyes burned. I kissed the mezuzah every time I entered my home. I observed Shabbat from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, lighting candles and blessing wine just as my grandmother taught me, just as her grandmother taught her. I owned a small jewelry shop on Eastern Parkway. Nothing grand, nothing that would make the newspapers. Wedding rings for young couples starting their lives together. Chai pendants for bar mitzvah boys. Menorahs for families preparing for Hanukkah. I fix watches. Simple work. Honest work. Work that allowed me to close early on Fridays, so I could walk home before the Sabbath began. Work that gave me time to study Torah in the afternoons when the shop was quiet. I thought I knew God. I thought I understood the covenant. I thought I was waiting, like all my people have been waiting, for Mashiach to come and restore the kingdom to Israel. I was wrong about everything. On March 15th, 2021, at exactly 12:47 in the afternoon, my heart stopped beating. Not slowly, not with warning. One moment I was examining a wedding ring that needed resizing. The next moment I was on the floor of my shop, looking up at the ceiling tiles, tasting copper in my mouth, feeling my chest collapse like someone had reached inside and crushed my heart with their fist. I died. For 11 minutes, according to the doctors at Mount Sinai Hospital, I was clinically dead. No heartbeat, no brain activity, no breath, just a body cooling on the tile floor, while Mrs. Goldstein from the shop next door pounded on my locked door and screamed my name. But I wasn't on that floor. I was somewhere else. Somewhere that defies every word I know in English or Hebrew or Yiddish. I was in the presence of light that thought, love that had weight, music that healed your soul just by hearing it. I was standing in a place where time folded on itself, where every moment contained eternity and eternity fit into every moment. And there, waiting for me with arms open and eyes that held every sunset I'd ever seen, every laugh of my children, every tear my grandmother shed over Sabbath candles, was Yeshua, Jesus, the one Christians call Christ, the one my people have been taught to fear, to reject, to see as the great deceiver who led so many of our brothers and sisters away from the faith of our fathers. But in that place beyond flesh and blood, beyond theology and tradition, beyond 2,000 years of pain and misunderstanding, there was no deception, only recognition, only the overwhelming certainty that I was looking into the face of the one every Passover Seder, every Day of Atonement, every Sabbath prayer had been preparing me to meet. He spoke my name, not David, not the English name I'd carried my whole life. He spoke my Hebrew name, the name written in the book of life before I was born, the name my soul answers to even when my mind doesn't remember it. David Ben Moshe, he said, and his voice was like honey and fire, like the sound of rushing water and gentle rain. You are right on time. Right on time for what I wanted to ask, but then he showed me. He took my hand, and oh, the warmth of that touch, like being wrapped in my grandmother's embrace, but multiplied by infinity. And he showed me a vision that has haunted my dreams and shaped my days ever since. He showed me water, more water than should exist on this earth. Water rising from the Atlantic Ocean like the finger of God, writing judgment across the eastern seaboard of America. I saw it with my own eyes. Not in a dream, not in my imagination. In that realm where all truth exists, where future and past meet in eternal now of God's perfect knowledge. I watched a tsunami taller than skyscrapers surge across Long Island, swallow Manhattan in minutes, reach inland further than any flood in recorded history. I saw cities I'd never visited disappear beneath waves that move with purpose, with intelligence, with the weight of divine decision. And as I watched, horrified and amazed, Yeshua spoke words that are burned into my memory like brands. This is not destruction, David ben Moshe. This is awakening. This is what comes when a nation forgets its covenant with the Almighty. Tell them what you have seen. Tell them the water comes not to destroy, but to cleanse. Tell them their God has not forgotten his promises, but they have forgotten their purpose. Even now, 3 years later, as I sit in this room and speak these words, my hands tremble because I know how this sounds. I know what it means for an Orthodox Jew to claim he met Jesus, to say that Yeshua showed him visions of America's future. I know the cost of speaking this truth. My own rabbi won't look me in the eye. My synagogue has asked me not to return. Old friends cross the street when they see me coming. My wife watches me with eyes full of love and confusion, wondering if the man who came back from the dead is the same man who left that morning to open his jewelry shop. But I made a vow, standing in that place of impossible light, surrounded by the presence of perfect love. I promised that if he sent me back, if he gave me another chance at life, I would tell anyone who would listen what I saw, even if they called me crazy, even if they called me a traitor to my faith, even if speaking this truth cost me everything I had built in this world. Because I've seen what waits in the next world, and that vision is worth any price. The water is coming. The great shaking has already begun. The veil between heaven and earth is growing thin, and soon, sooner than most people imagine, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is going to move across this nation like he moved across Egypt in the days of Moses. Some will be ready. Some will recognize the signs and prepare their hearts. Some will find safety not in high places, but in right places, in the places where his presence dwells. But most will not. Most will cling to their routines and their assumptions and their comfortable lives, even as the water rises around them. Most will refuse to see until it's too late to do anything, but cry out in the darkness for a mercy they spent their lives ignoring. This isn't just my story. This is your story. This is your invitation to choose which side of that great divide you want to be on when the moment comes. Once you hear what I'm about to tell you, once you see through my eyes what Yeshua showed me in that place beyond time, there's no going back to sleep. The veil will be lifted from your eyes, and you will see this world and what's coming to this world with a clarity that only comes from standing in the presence of eternal truth. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to see what a dead man learned in the arms of the living God? Are you ready for the truth that will change everything you thought you knew about prophecy, about judgment, about the love that moves behind all the chaos and confusion of these last days? Because what I'm about to share with you isn't just a warning. It's a love letter from eternity. It's a final call to wake up before the great sleep becomes permanent. It's your chance to hear the voice that spoke the universe into existence, calling your name in the darkness, offering you one last opportunity to step into the light before the water comes. This is just the beginning. How do you describe light that thinks? How do you explain love that has weight, substance, texture like the finest silk brushing against your soul? How do you find words in any earthly language for music that doesn't enter through your ears, but flows directly into the core of your being? Healing wounds you didn't know you carried, answering questions you didn't know you had been asking. He called my name in the dark and drew me into light that was alive. I was moving through what can only be called a tunnel, though tunnel suggests enclosure, limitation, walls that define where you can and cannot go. This was the opposite. Infinite space contained within perfect boundaries, vast freedom existing within absolute safety. The walls, they could be called walls, were made of flowing light, streams of radiance that move with purpose and intelligence, current of pure worship rising toward a source I could sense but not yet see. The light itself was singing, not with voices as we understand them, not with instruments as we know them, but with harmonies that existed in frequencies beyond human perception, melodies that spoke directly to the part of the soul that remembers its origin, its true home, its deepest longing. I could hear 10,000 harps playing in perfect unity, 10,000 voices raised in songs of praise that had been continuing since before the foundations of the world were laid, songs that would continue long after the last star burned out in the physical universe. And somehow, impossibly, I knew these songs. My soul knew them. They were written in the spiritual DNA that had been planted in me before I was born, melodies that every human heart carries, but forgets in the noise and distraction of earthly existence. As I moved through this river of light and sound, I found myself singing along, my voice joining the eternal chorus and harmonies I had never learned but had always known. He called my name in the dark and reminded me of songs I sang before I was born. The movement was effortless, like being carried by warm water or a gentle wind, but with direction and purpose that spoke of intelligence, of design, of love guiding every moment of the journey. I was being drawn upward and inward simultaneously, towards something that my spirit recognized even as my mind struggled to comprehend its impossibility. Time had no meaning here. I might have been traveling for seconds or centuries. It was impossible to tell. There was only the eternal now, the perfect present moment that contained all of history and all of future within its infinite embrace. Every second held forever, and forever was compressed into every second, creating a paradox that my earthly understanding could never grasp, but my spirit accepted as naturally as breathing. As I moved deeper into this realm of living light, I began to see them. Other souls, countless other souls, moving in the same direction, all drawn by the same irresistible love, all heading toward the same destination. Some were close enough that I could see their faces, expressions of wonder and joy and recognition that mirrored what I was feeling. Others were distant points of light, like stars in the sky made of worship, each one a unique creation beloved by the one who had made them. I recognized some of these travelers. My grandfather, the one who had taught me to wrap tefillin, who had died when I was 17, his face now radiant with a peace I had never seen in his earthly years. My grandmother, who had lit Sabbath candles every Friday for 73 years until arthritis made it impossible for her to strike the matches, now glowing with a light that made candles seem like shadows. Cousins who had perished in the Holocaust, relatives who had died of old age and accident and disease, all of them here, all of them whole, all of them more alive than they had ever been in flesh. But there were others too, souls I didn't recognize but somehow knew, faces that spoke different languages and came from different cultures, but who felt like family, like long-lost brothers and sisters finally reunited after a separation that had lasted far too long. A young woman with Asian features who smiled at me with the warmth of someone greeting a beloved friend. An elderly black man whose eyes held the wisdom of ages and the joy of someone who had found what he had been seeking his entire life. Children who had died too young, their faces bright with innocence preserved and wonder fulfilled. He called my name in the dark and showed me the family I never knew I had. There was no hierarchy here, no sense that some souls were more important or more beloved than others. The child who lived only days was as radiant as the sage who had lived decades. The simple man who had swept floors for a living shone with the same light as the scholar who had memorized entire libraries. Each soul was perfectly itself, uniquely created, irreplaceably precious, love with intensity that made earthly love seem pale by comparison. And we were all moving toward the same source, drawn by the same magnetic pull that operated not through force, but through attraction, through the irresistible appeal of perfect love calling the part of us that had always longed to return home. The very atmosphere of this place was worship, not the formal, structured worship of synagogues and churches and mosques, though those had their place and purpose, but a spontaneous, overflow worship that happens when creation encounters its creator, when a maid meets the maker, when finite minds glimpse infinite love and can respond in no other way than with praise. I could feel that praise rising from my own spirit, wordless but articulate, formless but perfectly shaped, joined with the praise of every other soul in this river of light, creating a symphony of gratitude that was both utterly personal and completely universal. This was what I had been made for. This was what every human heart had been designed to do. This was why we existed, not for ourselves, but for this moment when we would stand in the presence of the one who loved us into being and offer back to him the gift of ourselves freely given. He called my name in the dark and awakened the song my soul was created to sing. As I traveled deeper into this realm, the light grew brighter but never harsh, more intense but never overwhelming. It was like approaching the sun but finding that its heat was the perfect warmth of a mother's embrace, its brilliance the perfect illumination that revealed everything in its true colors, its true beauty, its true purpose. The boundaries between myself and this light were beginning to blur, not in a way that erased my individuality. I was still David Ben Abraham, still the man who would fix watches and sold wedding rings and argue with his teenage daughter about her curfew. But I was also more than that, connected to something larger than my personal identity, part of greater wholeness that included every soul that had ever lived, every prayer that had ever been whispered, every act of love that had ever been performed in the long history of creation. I could feel the presence of the Almighty growing stronger with each moment, not as a distant deity ruling from an unreachable throne, but as the intimate reality that had been closer to me than my own breath, more central to my existence than my own heartbeat, more essential to my being than my own thoughts. This was the presence I had sensed in the synagogue, the one who had been standing behind my shoulder during morning prayers, the one who had been calling my name in frequencies just below the threshold of earthly hearing. And then, ahead of me in the flowing light, I saw him waiting. Not bright like the sun that hurts your eyes and forces you to look away, but radiant like candlelight that draws you closer, invites you to lean in, makes you want to see more clearly. He was standing or floating or existing in some way that transcended physical positioning. With his arms open, his face turned toward me with an expression of such perfect love that I began to weep without knowing why, tears of joy and recognition, and homecoming flowing down cheeks that might not have been physical, but felt more real than any flesh I had ever inhabited. His face held every sunset I had ever seen, every laugh of my children, every moment of beauty that had ever stopped me in my tracks and made me whisper a prayer of gratitude. His eyes contained depths that spoke of infinite knowledge wedded to infinite compassion, perfect justice balanced with perfect mercy, absolute holiness married to absolute love. And somehow, impossibly, I knew who he was. He called my name in the dark, and in the light, I saw his face. Yeshua, Jesus, the one Christians call Christ, the one my people have been taught to fear or ignore or explain away. But here, in this place beyond theology and tradition, beyond 2,000 years of misunderstanding and persecution and religious warfare, there was no confusion, only recognition, only the overwhelming certainty that I was looking into the face of the one every Passover Seder had been pointing toward, every Day of Atonement had been longing for, every Sabbath prayer had been preparing me to meet, the Messiah of Israel, the hope of the nations, the desire of ages, the one who had been promised to Abraham, foreshadowed in the temple sacrifices, prophesied by Isaiah and Daniel and David, the one my ancestors had died waiting to see, the one who's come to restore all things and heal all wounds and answer all questions. But he was also more than that, bigger than any single tradition or culture or understanding could contain. He was the source of the light that was singing, the destination toward which all souls were traveling, the love that had created and sustained and redeemed every particle of existence since time began. His voice, when he spoke, was like honey and fire, like the sound of rushing water and gentle rain, like the first word spoken at creation, and the last word that would echo when time itself came to an end. David Ben Abraham, he said, and my Hebrew name from his lips sounded like the most beautiful music ever composed, like the answer to every prayer I had ever prayed, like the fulfillment of every promise ever made. My beloved son, you are right on time. He called my name in the dark, and in the light, he called me his beloved, right on time for what I wanted to ask. But the question dissolved before I could form it, replaced by understanding that flowed directly from his presence into my heart. I was right on time for this moment, this meeting, this revelation that would change not only my understanding of God, but my understanding of everything. Life, death, purpose, eternity, the meaning of my existence and the destiny of my people and the hope of the world. I was right on time for the vision he was about to show me, the burden he was about to place on my shoulders, the message I would carry back to a world that desperately needed to hear it, but might not be ready to receive it. I was right on time for the truth that would cost me everything I had built in the world below and give me everything I had never known I was missing. Right on time to learn that death was not an ending but a doorway, that separation was an illusion, that the love I had glimpsed in human relationships was just the faintest shadow of a love that was the very fabric of reality itself. Right on time to discover that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was not a distant deity, but an intimate father, not a harsh judge, but a perfect lover, not separate from his creation, but woven into its very essence, closer than close, more present than presence itself. He called my name in the dark, and in the light, he showed me who I had always been in his eyes. Standing in his presence, I felt no condemnation, no judgment, no sense of falling short or failing to measure up to some impossible standard. Instead, I felt known, completely, thoroughly, intimately known in ways that went beyond my conscious understanding of myself. He knew every thought I had ever thought, every word I had ever spoken, every action I had ever taken, every secret I had ever hidden, every shame I had ever carried. And he loved me, not despite these things, but including them, encompassing them, transforming them into part of stories so beautiful and meaningful that I could never have imagined it during my years of walking around in flesh. Thinking I understood what life was about. He knew about the times I had lost my temper with Benjamin for tracking mud through the apartment. He knew about the small jealousies I had felt toward more successful businessmen in the neighborhood. He knew about the moments when I had doubted God's goodness during the darkest periods of our financial struggles. He knew about the lustful thoughts I had harbored and confessed and been forgiven for more times than I could count. And none of it mattered, not because it was excused or overlooked, but because it had all been woven into the tapestry of my becoming, all used to shape me into the man who could stand in this moment and receive what he was about to show me, all transformed by love into threads of gold in a design too complex and beautiful for any finite mind to fully grasp. He called my name in the dark, and in the light, he showed me the story he had been writing with my life. But this recognition, this homecoming, this overwhelming sense of being perfectly loved and completely understood, was only the beginning. I could sense that he had brought me here for a purpose, that this wasn't just a reunion but a commission, not just a revelation but a responsibility. He was about to show me something that would change everything, not just for me, but for everyone who would hear what I had seen. Something about the future, about judgment, about mercy, about the great awakening that was coming to shake every foundation that could be shaken and reveal what could never be moved. Something about water, great water, water that would rise and fall and cleanse and reveal and prepare the way for what was coming after. He reached out his hand toward me, and I could see in that simple gesture the same love that had stretched out the heavens and laid the foundations of the earth, the same power that had spoken light into existence and breathed life into dust, the same mercy that had made covenants with Abraham and Moses and David, that had preserved his people through exile and persecution and the long, dark centuries of waiting. "Come," he said, and his voice carried the authority of creation itself, the gentleness of perfect love, the urgency of time running short and purposes needing to be fulfilled. There is something you need to see. Something your people need to know, something the world must hear before it is too late. He called my name in the dark and in the light. He called me to see what was hidden from the world. I reached out and took his hand, and oh, the warmth of that touch, the electricity of that connection, the sense of coming home to a place I had never been but had always belonged to. In that moment of contact, I could feel his heartbeat, the rhythm that had been pulsing underneath all creation since the beginning, the love song that held every atom in its proper place and kept every star in its appointed course. And then, still holding my hand, he began to walk with me toward what looked like a vast window opening in the realm of light, a portal through which I could glimpse the world I had left behind, the future that was approaching, the destiny that awaited those who would hear his voice and respond before the great shaking began. This was why I had been brought here. This was the burden I would carry back. This was the vision that would haunt my dreams and shape my days and cost me everything I thought I wanted so I could gain everything I never knew I needed. He called my name in the dark and in the light. He showed me what was coming to the world. The vision was about to begin, and nothing would ever be the same. The pain came without warning, without mercy, without the courtesy of gradual onset that might have allowed me to call for help or reach for the phone or whisper a final prayer before the darkness claimed me. One moment I was examining the wedding ring under my jeweler's lamp, noting how the gold had worn thin on the band's inner surface, thinking about how love, too, wears away at the edges, polishes itself smooth through the friction of daily contact, becomes more precious as it grows thinner. The next moment, the world exploded in my chest like a bomb detonating behind my sternum, sending waves of agony radiating through my left arm, up my neck, across my back with a force that dropped me to my knees beside my workbench. The ring fell from my fingers, rolled across the floor with a tiny metallic sound that seemed impossibly loud in the sudden stillness of my paralyzed lungs. I tried to call out, tried to form words, but my voice had abandoned me along with my breath, and all I could produce was a gasping wheeze that barely disturbed the air around my lips. He called my name in the dark, and my body began its final surrender. The pressure in my chest intensified, as if an invisible fist had reached through my ribs and was slowly crushing my heart with methodical, deliberate force. Fire raced down my left arm, not the gentle warmth of sunlight, but the searing heat of molten metal poured directly into my veins, spreading from my shoulder to my fingertips with precision that spoke of systems shutting down, electrical impulses misfiring, the machinery of life grinding to a halt. I could see everything in my shop with extraordinary clarity, as if the approaching darkness had sharpened my vision to supernatural acuity. The wedding rings arranged in their velvet-lined cases, the golden chive pendants hanging from their display hooks, the menorahs and Star of David necklaces catching the afternoon light streaming through my front window. All of it seemed to be spinning, rotating slowly around me like I was the center of some cosmic carousel. Or perhaps I was spinning, and the world was holding still. It was impossible to tell which. The taste of copper flooded my mouth, metallic and bitter. The taste of blood and electricity, and something else I couldn't identify, something that reminded me of the air after lightning strikes, charged and dangerous and alive with invisible power. My legs gave out completely, and I found myself falling toward the cold tile floor of my shop, the same floor I had swept every evening for 15 years. The same floor where I had knelt to retrieve dropped earrings and scattered screws, and the tiny springs that had popped out of broken watch mechanisms. Time seemed to stretch and compress simultaneously, each second feeling like an hour, while the whole experience seemed to occur in the space between heartbeats. I could hear Mrs. Goldstein from the fabric shop next door, her voice high and frantic, calling my name to the thin wall that separated our businesses, then the sound of her footsteps running, then her fists pounding on my locked front door with increasing desperation. David Goldstein, open this door. Something's wrong. I can feel it. David. Her voice seemed to reach me from across a vast distance, as if she were calling from the bottom of a well, while I floated somewhere far above, connected to the world by threads that were growing thinner with each labored breath I couldn't quite complete. He called my name in the dark, and the threads that bound me to flesh began to fray. The cold of the tile floor against my cheek was the last physical sensation I remember clearly. Cold and solid and real, the final proof that I still inhabited a body, still existed in the realm of temperature and texture and weight. But even that sensation was fading, becoming abstract, a memory of coldness rather than coldness itself, as if my nerve endings were shutting down one by one, turning off the lights in the house of my flesh before abandoning it entirely. I could see the ceiling of my shop, the fluorescent fixtures I had installed myself 3 years earlier, the water stain near the back corner that I had never gotten around to having repaired. But the ceiling was becoming transparent, insubstantial, like looking up through water toward a surface that grew more distant with each passing moment. The walls, too, seemed to be dissolving, their solidity melting away until they were nothing more than suggestions of boundaries, whispers of separation between what was inside and what was outside. And then, in the space between one failing heartbeat and the next, came the silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of perfect stillness, complete and profound and more beautiful than any music I had ever heard. The pounding of Mrs. Goldstein's fists on my door faded to nothing. The distant hum of traffic on Eastern Parkway disappeared entirely. Even the whisper of my own breath, which had been growing shallower and more irregular, simply stopped. In that silence, I felt my consciousness separate from my body like water poured from a vessel, effortless and natural and utterly without pain. I was floating, rising, looking down at the shell of flesh that had housed me for 43 years, that had carried me through childhood and adolescence and marriage and fatherhood, and the 10,000 ordinary days that had brought me to this extraordinary moment. He called my name in the dark, and I discovered I was not my body but its temporary guest. From my new vantage point several feet above the floor, I could see everything with impossible clarity. My physical form sprawled beside my workbench, one hand still clutching the magnifying glass I had been using to examine the wedding ring. My kippah askew, my prayer book fallen open to a page of morning blessings I would never recite again in that particular voice, with those particular lips, through those particular lungs. The paramedics were arriving now. I could see them to the front window of my shop. 2 young men in dark blue uniforms carrying equipment I couldn't identify, moving with the practiced urgency of people who have witnessed this transition many times before. Mrs. Goldstein was pointing and gesturing and crying, her face streaked with tears, her words inaudible in the perfect silence that surrounded me. They broke down my door with surprising ease, the lock giving way with a sound I should have heard but didn't, and suddenly my small shop was filled with strangers kneeling beside my body, pressing equipment to my chest, inserting tubes, performing the ancient ritual of trying to call back a soul that has already begun its journey home. But I felt no urgency, no desire to return to the flesh they were working so desperately to revive. Instead, I felt a lightness I had never experienced before, as if I had been carrying invisible weights my entire life, and had suddenly been freed from their burden. The concerns that seemed so important just moments before, the rent on the shop, Rachel's college applications, Benjamin's upcoming bar mitzvah, the slight irregularity in our bank account balance, all of it seemed as distant and irrelevant as the toys I played with as a child. He called my name in the dark, and I began to remember who I had been before I forgot. The ceiling of my shop, which had grown transparent, now dissolved completely, and I found myself rising to the layers of the building above. Through Mrs. Patterson's apartment on the 2nd floor where she sat watching television, unaware of the drama unfolding below. Through the Ramirez family's apartment on the 3rd floor, where Maria was helping her daughter with homework while dinner simmered on the stove. Through the roof and into the open air above Brooklyn, where the afternoon sun painted everything in shades of gold and amber. But I wasn't rising alone. There was a current carrying me, invisible but undeniably present, like being lifted by warm water or gentle wind, moving with purpose towards something I couldn't yet see but somehow recognize, the way you recognize your own neighborhood when you return from a long journey, even in the dark, even with your eyes closed. And in that current, in that gentle, irresistible pull toward home, I heard it clearly for first time. Not my English name, not the David that appeared on my driver's license and social security card and the deed to my shop, but my Hebrew name, my soul name, the name that had been written in the book of life before time began. David Ben Abraham. The voice said, and it wasn't coming from anywhere specific, but from everywhere at once, from the light itself, from the very fabric of the reality I was moving through. David, son of Abraham, you are coming home. He called my name in the dark, and I recognized the voice I had been listening for my entire life. There was no fear in this recognition, no resistance, no desperate clinging to the life I was leaving behind. Instead, there was only the deep satisfaction of finally understanding what that presence in the synagogue had been, what that stirring in my spirit had been preparing me for, why the very air had seemed charged with expectation in those final weeks and days. This wasn't death. This was birth. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning, the most important beginning of my existence. The life I had lived on Eastern Parkway, in the jewelry shop, with Sarah and Rachel and Benjamin, had been the preparation, the rehearsal, the long apprenticeship for this moment, when I would finally meet the one who had been calling my name in the dark corners of every prayer, every blessing, every moment of wonder at the beauty and mystery of creation. Below me, growing smaller with each moment, I could see the paramedics working over my body with increasing desperation. Could see Mrs. Goldstein standing in my doorway with her hands pressed to her mouth. Could see the small crowd of neighbors beginning to gather on the sidewalk. But their grief felt distant and temporary, like watching actors perform a play about sadness rather than experiencing sadness itself. I wanted to tell them that the man they were mourning wasn't gone, just changed locations, like someone who had moved from one house to another, from one country to another, from one way of being to another. I wanted to tell Mrs. Goldstein that her tears, though beautiful and sacred and proof of the love that connects all souls, were unnecessary, that I was more alive now than I had ever been in flesh. But already I was too far away for such messages to reach them, already moving beyond the realm where human grief and human comfort operate, moving towards something so much greater and more wonderful than anything I had imagined during all those years of synagogue attendance and Torah study and careful observance of commandments that were meant to prepare the soul for exactly this moment. He called my name in the dark, and finally, I was ready to step into his light. The last thing I saw of the world I had known was the roof of Beit Knesset Anshe Sfard, the synagogue where I prayed every morning for 23 years. Its modest dome catching the afternoon sun like a beacon, its windows facing east toward Jerusalem, toward the ancient holy city that had lived in Jewish hearts for 3,000 years, toward the temple that would be rebuilt when Mashiach came to restore all things. And as that sight faded below me, as I rose higher into light that was not light as I had ever understood it, but something infinitely more subtle and powerful and alive, I felt the first whisper of understanding about who Mashiach really was, about who had been waiting for me in that realm beyond flesh and time, about who had been calling my name in the dark all along. This was just the crossing. The real journey was about to begin. How do you describe light that thinks? How do you explain love that has weight, substance, texture like silk brushing against your soul? He called my name in the dark and drew me into light that was alive. I was moving through what could only be called a tunnel, though tunnel suggests walls and limitation. This was infinite space contained within perfect boundaries, vast freedom within absolute safety. The walls were flowing light, streams of radiance moving with purpose and intelligence, currents of pure worship rising toward a source I could sense but not yet see. The light itself was singing, not with voices as we understand them, but with harmonies that existed beyond human perception, melodies that spoke directly to the soul's memory of home. I could hear 10,000 harps in perfect unity, 10,000 voices raised in songs that had been continuing since before the world's foundations were laid. And somehow, impossibly, I knew these songs. My soul knew them. They were written in spiritual DNA planted before I was born, melodies every human heart carries but forgets in earthly noise. As I moved through this river of light and sound, I found myself singing along, my voice joining the eternal chorus and harmonies I had never learned but had always known. He called my name in the dark and reminded me of songs I sang before I was born. I began to see them. Other souls, countless souls, moving in the same direction, all drawn by the same irresistible love. Some close enough to see their faces, expressions of wonder and joy and recognition. Others distant points of light, like stars in a sky made of worship. My grandfather, who taught me to wrap tefillin, his face radiant with peace I'd never seen in his earthly years. My grandmother, who lit Sabbath candles for 73 years, now glowing with light that made flames seem like shadows. Relatives who perished in the Holocaust, all whole, all more alive than they'd ever been in flesh. But there were others too, souls I didn't recognize but somehow knew, faces from different cultures who felt like family. A young Asian woman smiling with warmth of greeting a beloved friend. An elderly black man whose eyes held wisdom of ages and joy of someone who'd found what he'd been seeking. He called my name in the dark and showed me the family I never knew I had. The very atmosphere was worship, not formal synagogue worship, but spontaneous overflow when creation encounters creator, when a maid meets maker, when finite minds glimpse infinite love and can only respond with praise. And then, ahead in the flowing light, I saw him waiting. He called my name in the dark, and in the light, I saw his face. Not bright like the sun that hurts your eyes and forces you to look away, but radiant like candlelight that draws you closer, invites you to lean in, makes you want to see more clearly. His face held every sunset I had ever seen, every laugh of my children, every moment of beauty that had ever stopped me in my tracks and made me whisper a prayer of gratitude. His eyes contained depths that spoke of infinite knowledge wedded to infinite compassion, perfect justice balanced with perfect mercy, absolute holiness married to absolute love. And somehow, impossibly, I knew who he was. He called my name in the dark, and in the light, I saw his face. Yeshua, Jesus, the one Christians call Christ, the one my people have been taught to fear or ignore. But here, in this place beyond theology and tradition, beyond 2,000 years of misunderstanding, there was no confusion, only recognition, only the overwhelming certainty that I was looking into the face of the one every Passover Seder had been pointing toward, every Day of Atonement had been longing for. I fell to my knees in that spiritual realm, not from command but from the sheer weight of recognition. Tears flowing like a child who'd been lost for hours and finally found his father. The sobs came from depths I didn't know existed. 3,000 years of Jewish longing pouring out in a single moment of homecoming. My people, I whispered through the tears, we've been waiting so long. His response came not through words, but through understanding that flowed directly into my heart. I know, beloved, I was always there, listening, loving, preparing you for this moment. He called my name in the dark, and in the light, he showed me the tapestry. He touched my forehead, and suddenly I could see it all. The scattering, the preservation, the survival through persecution that should have destroyed us but only made us stronger. Every ritual, every prayer, every Sabbath candle lit by Jewish mothers for 3 millennia had been preparation for this recognition, this reunion, this moment when the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob will reveal his face to his chosen people. The time of scattering is ending, he said, his voice like honey and fire. The gathering begins now. But first, there is something you must see. Something your people need to know. Something the world must hear. He took my hand, and oh, the warmth of that touch, the electricity of connection, the sense of coming home. Before us, a window opened in the realm of light, a portal through which I could glimpse the world I had left behind. Look and see what has come to the land you call home, he said, his voice heavy with sorrow and love. See why I brought you to this place, why you must carry this burden back, no matter the cost. He called my name in the dark, and in the light, he showed me what was coming to America. I looked through that window of light, and what I saw changed everything I thought I knew about judgment, about mercy, about the love that sometimes appears as wrath to a world that has forgotten its covenant with the living God. I saw water, more water than should exist on this earth. And I understood that my real journey was just beginning. This was not a dream, not imagination, not the fevered hallucination of a dying brain starved of oxygen. This was the eternal realm where all truth exists, where future and past meet in the perfect knowledge of the one who sees the end from beginning. Standing beside me, Yeshua's presence anchored me as the window of light opened wider, revealing the world I had left behind with supernatural clarity. I was soaring above the East Coast like an eagle, seeing with eyes I could perceive not just what was, but what was coming. Below me, the morning sun reflected off Manhattan's windows. New Jersey highways buzzed with busy commuters. Carolina beaches stretched peaceful and unaware. Everything looked normal, safe, permanent. Watch, he said, his voice heavy with sorrow and love. See what comes when a nation turns from its covenant with the Almighty. He called my name in the dark and showed me the water that would wash the land. From beyond the horizon's curve, it came, not the blue of ocean water, but dark green, almost black, moving with purpose and intelligence like the finger of God writing judgment across the face of the deep, taller than the Statue of Liberty, higher than the Empire State Building, moving at the speed of wind, but carrying the weight of divine decision. It struck Long Island first. I watched my own neighborhood in Crown Heights disappear beneath waves that swallowed buildings like they were sandcastles. Manhattan, that island of steel and pride and human achievement, was consumed in minutes. Subway tunnels becoming underwater rivers, streets transformed into churning canyons of divine cleansing. But this was not destruction, he whispered to my spirit. This was awakening. This was the great washing that will remove what blocked heaven's light and preserve what was built on eternal foundations. He called my name in the dark and showed me islands of safety in the storm. Some places the water flowed around. Synagogues where faithful prayers still rose. Churches where the true gospel was preached. Homes where families chose righteousness over convenience. These stood like rocks in a torrent. Proof that spiritual foundations are the only ones that cannot be shaken. Tell them, he said as the vision faded. Tell my people, both houses of Israel, that the water comes not to destroy, but to restore, to wash away the barriers that have kept them from their calling. He called my name in the dark and gave me a burden too heavy and too precious to leave unspoken. But the vision was not finished. As the waters of judgment receded in my sight, I expected to see devastation, emptiness, the hollow aftermath of divine wrath. Instead, Yeshua's face radiated not sadness or anger, but pure, blazing hope. Show me what comes after the water, I whispered, and the window of light shifted, revealing the same coastline but months, perhaps years later. He called my name in the dark and showed me the light that would rise from the flood. Where Manhattan's prideful towers had stood, new communities clustered around houses of worship. Not monuments to human achievement, but humble centers of divine encounter. Synagogues and churches stood like twin flames, their lights no longer separate but unified, casting the same golden glow across neighborhoods where Jewish and Christian families worked side by side, rebuilding not just structures but understanding. I watched children learning Hebrew and English together, studying Torah and gospel simultaneously, finally comprehending they were participants in the same eternal narrative, branches of the same ancient tree that had been artificially separated for 2 millennia. The awakening spread far beyond the disaster zones. Across America, synagogues opened their doors to teach the Jewish roots of faith. Churches discovered their Hebrew foundations. Thousands of young people abandoned empty pursuits of social media and materialism, seeking the ancient paths, asking the deep questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Who is the God of my ancestors? He called my name in the dark and showed me hearts turning toward home. In damaged schools, revival meetings erupted. In flooded community centers, Torah studies flourished. People sold salvaged possessions to help strangers, discovering what the tsunami had really moved. Not just water, but human spirits toward their true calling, their authentic purpose, their forgotten first love. This is not frightening, Yeshua said, his voice carrying the authority of creation itself. This is preparation for the greatest joy, the greatest awakening America has ever known. The water comes first to prepare the way, but I am coming soon. I felt the weight of a prayer shawl settling on my shoulders, the burden of commission, the responsibility of carrying this message not just to my Jewish people, but to anyone with ears to hear, Jews, Christians, Muslims, seekers, skeptics, anyone hungry enough for truth to receive it. He called my name in the dark and sent me back to call others into his marvelous light. Safety, he whispered as the vision faded, is not found in high places, but in right places, where my presence dwells, where my people pray, where my love is lived. Coming back was like being born in reverse, forced into a container that no longer fit, compressed into a reality too small to hold what I had become. I awakened in Mount Sinai Hospital to the sound of machines beeping, tubes in my throat, Sarah's tear-streaked face hovering above mine like a worried angel. "You were gone," she whispered, clutching my hand. 11 minutes. The doctor said, they said your brain had no activity. But you're back. You're different, but you're back. Different. Yes. How you explain to the woman you've loved for 18 years that you've seen the face of Messiah? How do you tell your Orthodox rabbi that Yeshua, the name we've been taught to fear, is the one our ancestors died waiting to see? He called my name in the dark and sent me back to a world too small for such truth. Rabbi Goldstein, who had been my spiritual father since childhood, visited 3 days after I returned home. His reaction was swift and surgical. "David, you had a heart attack, oxygen deprivation. The mind creates hallucinations to cope with trauma. You need rest, not revelations." But when I tried to describe what I had seen, the water, the awakening, the hope that would follow judgment, his face hardened with a pain I recognized. The same pain our people had carried for 2,000 years whenever someone claimed to have found the Messiah. This is what the persecutors have always said. He told me, his voice breaking, that Yeshua is our Messiah. "David, you're not having revelations. You're having a breakdown." The isolation began immediately. Friends crossed Eastern Parkway to avoid me. Whispers followed my footsteps. "David Rosen has lost his mind. David Rosen has become a Christian. David Rosen is no longer one of us." He called my name in the dark, and the darkness struck back through those I loved. The spiritual warfare was relentless. Every night at 3 a.m., pressure would settle on my chest like an invisible weight, making it impossible to breathe. My computer crashed whenever I tried to document the vision. Anonymous calls filled our home with heavy breathing at all hours. Sarah's car had flat tires 3 times in 1 week. Worst of all, the children began to suffer. Benjamin developed nightmares about drowning. Rachel refused to leave the house, gripped by fears she couldn't name. Sarah pleaded with me to stop talking about what I had seen. "Maybe," she suggested one evening as we stood in our kitchen, "maybe some experiences are meant to stay private. Maybe God gave you this vision for your own peace, not for sharing." I wanted to agree. I wanted to return to my simple life of fixing watches and selling wedding rings, to protect my family from the cost of carrying divine truth in a world that profits from spiritual sleep. He called my name in the dark, and in the light, I remembered his face calling me to speak. But I had made a vow in the presence of perfect love, and the intensity of the resistance only confirmed what I had seen was real. Forces that desperately didn't want people prepared, didn't want souls awakened, didn't want hearts turned toward home before the water comes. So I made my choice. I would speak to anyone willing to listen, even if it cost me everything I had built in this world. Because some truths are too precious to bury, and some promises too sacred to break. If you're still listening, if something is stirring in your spirit as I speak these words, this is no coincidence. This is a divine appointment. You were meant to hear this message, meant to receive this warning, meant to be among those who prepare before the water comes. He called my name in the dark, and now he is calling yours. A war is happening right now for your soul, not someday, but today, this moment. Forces are working to keep you entertained, distracted, asleep to your true purpose, while other forces are fighting to awaken you before it's too late. The shaking I saw coming to America is already beginning, but it extends far beyond our borders. This is global. This is a separation of what is real from what is artificial, what is eternal from what is temporary, what is love from what is fear. Most people won't survive this spiritually. Some won't survive it physically. They'll cling to the old systems even as the water rises around them. But you don't have to be most people. You could be among the awakened ones, the prepared remnant, those who hear the call and respond before the storm arrives. Stop waiting for permission to pursue God. Stop making excuses. Too busy, too sophisticated, too hurt by religion. Don't assume your parents' or grandparents' faith automatically belongs to you. Read the Gospel of John. Read Isaiah. Read the Psalms. Find awakened believers who are walking in truth, not playing religious games. He called my name in the dark, and the time for games is ending. Forgive those who owe you debts. Seek forgiveness from those you owe. Tell your family you love them. The window is closing. The signs are accelerating. This generation is witnessing something unprecedented in recent history. To my Jewish brothers and sisters, Yeshua is calling you home, not to abandon your heritage, but to fulfill it, to become who you were always meant to be. The water is coming, but those who know their God and are rooted in truth will stand firm like rocks in the torrent. He called my name in the dark. What is he calling you to do in the light? Choose today. Choose now. The time is here. 3 years. 3 years since I died on that tile floor and discovered that death is just a doorway, since I stood in the presence of perfect love and received a burden too sacred to bury. 3 years of carrying this vision like holy fire that refuses to be extinguished. Every morning before sunrise, I stand at my bedroom window, facing east toward the ocean, counting sunrises, wondering how many remain before the extraordinary breaks through the ordinary. I watch people hurrying to appointments, scrolling phones, living as if tomorrow is guaranteed, and my heart breaks, not with pity, but with love for souls who don't yet know what's coming. He called my name in the dark, and now I call yours in the fading light. There's only one guarantee in this world: God's love and the truth of his word. Everything else, your job, your savings, your plans, your certainties, people are about to discover just how temporary these really are. The veil will be lifted. The water is coming. The great awakening has already begun. This is no longer just my story. The moment you heard these words, they became woven into your spiritual DNA. Whether you believe them or doubt them, you cannot unknown what you now know. You will remember this moment, these words, this choice, and you will understand why it was no coincidence you were chosen to receive this message. This was a love letter from eternity, a warning from the heart of God, an invitation to step beyond the ordinary into a faith so extraordinary that you will walk on water while others drown in their certainties. When the foundations shake and the trusted systems crumble, when people are desperate for answers but finding only questions, you will remember that you were prepared. You were chosen for such a time as this. So I ask you one final time, will you rise or will you sleep? Will you awaken or remain unconscious? Will you live or merely exist? The time is now. The time is now. The time is now. If this message stirred something in your spirit, you're meant to be part of our family at NDE Tales HQ. Subscribe and share this with someone whose heart is ready for awakening. But most importantly, return to the gospel, return to truth, return to Christ. The greatest near-death experience is dying to your old self and being born again into the reality of God's love. While you're still alive, prepare others for what's coming. He called my name in the dark, in the light. May you find your calling in the great awakening. Until we meet again, either in this realm or the next, Shalom, my brother, my sister. The time is now.